have my fence, I have my charger, and I have a hungry group of animals. This week I'm going to show you how we use rotational grazing to make sure that our animals get the best pasture we have. Rotational grazing is a lot easier than you might think. I know when we first started we were super intimidated. It just seemed impossible to figure out how much to give the animals, how to know when to move them. And today I'm going to show you that it's a lot easier than you think. Sometimes we just kind of get that analysis paralysis. We overthink things. So you need 4 things to do rotational grazing. You need electric fence of some kind. We use our Premier 1 nets. You need a charger. We use solar powered electric chargers. A shelter for the animals, which if you happen to have some great trees in your pasture, you might have that built in. We use all sorts of different things around here. We have calf huts. We have homemade monstrosities. And we have all sorts of variations on those. And you need some hungry animals that are looking for good pasture. So this is what we've got our setup. I'm going to tell you how we got started, what it looked like when we first started, and how to progress and build up pastures that look awesome and to keep your animals healthy and happy. And it really is pretty simple. So we started with 2 of these 100-foot Premier 1 nets. Each one of these is about 100 foot. This is what it looks like folded up on the ground. That's one. We had one that the sheep were in, or the goats, so we had 2 groups of animals. But one that the animals were in and one that we set up to move them into. So a 100-foot fence makes a 25 by 25 foot square. We set it up. We had 4 sheep that we would put in there, and we would just watch it. So you set them up for one day, and about each day they would have run out of grass in that small square, and you'd set up the next one and move them to it. And each time you do it, you learn a little bit more about your animals. Our pastures weren't that great. We had those 4 sheep. They could do quite a bit in a whole day. So some days we'd come out at lunchtime and we'd see that the sheep were out of food, and we'd go ahead and set up the next fence and get them moved over. Sometimes we'd come out and they had plenty of food left, so we would leave them the whole day. Every once in a while we would move them because it was, the next day and ready to move, and we'd come out, and after we'd moved them, we'd look back and think, there was probably a little bit of food left. But that's it. Repetition is what teaches you how much your animals need and how much they'll eat. You can see in this pasture behind me, and I'll show you a little more detail, that there's a lot of stuff. It looks like there's a ton of food in here. My sheep are back here, and my goats are right here. And so you can see in there that there's a lot of this yellow flower. It's yellow crownbeard. And so it looks like there's a ton of food in there, but they actually don't eat that. So that took a lot of learning. We'd set up a pasture and think it looked like we had tons of feed, but they wouldn't eat it. So we have learned to just watch the animals and figure out when it's looking empty and sparse, we move them. If not, it's so funny. It sounds so simple. It sounds so easy. But if you've never done it before, it's like, well, how will I know? And it just takes practice. So don't worry if your animals are sitting down, chewing their cud, being happy and lazy. Let me show you my sheep. Then you know that they are all good to go. So look at these guys. They're all laying down, super happy, chewing their cud. They're not baaing at me, begging for more food. They're not distressed in any way. That means they are happy and full, and there's plenty of food here for them to eat. The next step after just getting practice with 1 square at a time and figuring out when it was time to move the animals was when we sold off baby goats. The next spring we bought ourselves 2 more nets, so then we could have 2 that the sheep were in and 2 that we moved them into, and so that made our pasture a lot larger, and we could go 2 or 3 days before having to move them. So this right here, this area that these goats are in, is 2 fences, and we have 6 goats in here, mamas and babies, and the sheep are also in 2 Premier 1 nets. And there are 5 sheep in there, including our ram Sean right there. So this is what we've upgraded to, and we really haven't gone past this. 2 fences lets us go about 2 days, and we don't want to leave them longer than 6 at the very most, because parasite eggs will hatch in about 6 days. And one of the main reasons that we use rotational grazing is to help keep our animals healthy and keep them away from parasites. They get parasites from their own droppings, and so moving them off within a few days keeps them healthy. We do also have minerals with them, so we have a couple different mineral feeders. Ivy was just getting some there. That's just a little homemade mineral feeder on the ground, and the flap lifts up to one of those plastic mineral feeders in here. There we go, and Ivy knows how to get it out of there. Our sheep have a shelter that we built, so there's just one of those plastic mineral feeders hung up inside there. But you can start with as little equipment as possible. You could start with one fence if you had goats that weren't going to run away from you. Our sheep, we had to have 2 fences because the sheep were so afraid of us that they would have bolted. The goats are super friendly. They're a little annoying to round up because they wander off, but they are super friendly, and so we can manage with 1 fence and then just pick it up and let them loose and move it and then round them back in. Now that takes some time, but it is possible. So you don't need a lot to get started. They just need space, a fence and a charger, then minerals and shelter and water. We just use these big black bowls. It looks like they need a refill. So it's been a pretty easy system to manage. It does take work to move your animals every day, but the health benefits, not only to the animals by reducing parasite load and to the pastures. Our pastures are pretty dramatically different in just the 3 years that we've lived here. I just recently did a farm tour showing the 3-year changes, and there's a huge difference in how thick our pastures are and the variety of species we're seeing. Not just all weeds, but we're seeing some new grasses come up too. And that is directly because of rotating our animals, not overgrazing any one place. So that's been a huge benefit. It is a little bit of work to move them around, but it is worth it. The animals are happy, and it keeps them contained in an area so you know where they are. It's actually a lot easier to kind of manage them. But I just wanted to encourage you, if you've been thinking about rotationally grazing your animals, it is definitely worth it, and it's also not that hard to get started. So if you have any questions about what to do next, I actually have a whole video about getting started with electric fencing. So I will link that here so you can find that if you have questions about electric fences or chargers. If you have any questions about rotationally grazing, I'd be happy to answer them. And please feel free to leave a comment. And otherwise, we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.